I am calling the Wednesday, August 31st, 2022 Code Review Task Force meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. The clerk will please take roll.
Tim Hull. Donna Jensen.
Here.
Godin Number.
Here.
Hi, Godin. Andrew, I'm gonna learn one of these days. I keep trying. Andrew
Keep trying.
Newsma.
Here.
Nancy Neiston.
Here.
Michael Bryan. Steve Roush.
Present.
Shelley Ward.
Here.
Sarah Albrecht. Joshua Walls. Okay.
Members of the public may attend in person or participate online at zoom.us/join. Meeting ID 846-1495-6750. Once you log into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator if you wish to speak to an item. More information is available in the agenda packet and on the city's website. Now on to the agenda. Item 1 is the adoption of the agenda. City clerk, does staff have any changes to the agenda?
Nothing from staff.
Do any task force members have changes? May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
All right, have a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Donna, seconded by Steve. To adopt the agenda, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay and raise your hand. Motion carries. Item 2 of the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the July 27th meeting. Does staff have any changes to the minutes?
Nothing from staff.
Do any task force members have changes? All right, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, may I have a second?
Good. Second.
All right, moved by Shelley, seconded by Steve. To approve the minutes, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 3, review outstanding items. Michelle, I believe you have an update on the task force timeline.
Yeah, in your packets, I put in there the timeline. This is something that we use with our staff to kind of keep track of when things are coming before the task force, and so that staff know when we should start reviewing those chapters before you have to go through them. So I put this in there. This is member Nice Student's request to talk about the timeline, and definitely this timeline has taken longer than expected. So this is just kind of a
What, was it in this packet here?
No,
not
it's
the
in
one I
online.
handed out, the one that was online.
Okay.
Oh.
Did you?
Is a paper copy available? I didn't.
You
look.
didn't see it in the packet? Okay.
I assumed it will be here, so I didn't.
Okay, I did not make copies of this, but that's probably something we could do. Okay. And why don't I do that? And other than that, I've got it right here. But basically, it's showing us that, we kind of thought that we would be taking some of the chapters more than one at a time, and that's really not happening. We're kind of going through some of these deeper chapters. Some of them are even taking more than one meeting, right? Particularly like the liquor licensing. That one took a lot of time. So, I think, Nancy, did you want to talk about, bring up what your concerns are?
Yeah, we, as a group, decided kind of how we would review things and the time we would take to review, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone was still on board. We didn't necessarily know the ramifications of some of those decisions. I would say the group decided that careful review and thoroughness were of a higher priority than expeditiously moving through. I wasn't necessarily on that side, but I'll go with the group. So it's seeming indeed that it would be perhaps up to maybe another year if we continue at this pace. And I just wanted to see the mood of the group, if everyone has that same understanding, expectation, and if that's all great with everybody, or if there was any thought of changing how the review process goes. That's why I asked for that, so I appreciate it.
Well, Nancy, do you have an opinion that you'd like to share?
My opinion would be that we reduce perhaps some of the, I'll just call it thoroughness, extremely careful review, almost word by word by word, and consider a slightly different way of doing it. That would be my opinion.
Okay. Michelle?
I just wanted to say, if it's something that the members are open to, I could try to expedite some things by saying if there was some question about it, it could be, if there are things that need to go back, instead of discussing them so thoroughly on the night of, I could bring back more information so that the group might make a quicker decision. You know, how we bring back, for instance, the pawn shops and resellers tonight, how we brought back some of those things that there was some back and forth on with more review. For things that we need more review on, maybe we send those back for research faster or
Okay.
we could consider calling a question, making a decision faster if everybody feels like they've been heard. I mean, we don't want to keep people from being heard, but we want to, just trying to think about this expeditiously. So if anybody else has any other suggestions, we're open to hearing that.
Steve?
I don't think I want to go for another year. I think we should readdress the schedule and the number of chapters per meeting and make sure we're hitting the right tact. And if that dictates a different level of thoroughness or requires more pre-work or more clarity, so be it. But I don't think we want this to go another year.
Okay.
Others' opinions?
Michael?
When I originally signed up, I was open to go however long we could, but my heart and liver failure are now terminal, and I'm on my last evaluation for heart and liver transplant in Tennessee.
Thanks.
And if that doesn't fall through, I'm probably gonna move back in with my mother in California, because I can't take care of myself anymore. And if I do get listed, I'll be moving to Tennessee, or close to it. So either way, in probably the next couple months, I won't be available anymore. So I don't know if that changes anybody's decision on things, but it just makes it so there's maybe more difficult or to get quorum if there's one less person. I don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry for the circumstances brought you to that, and wish you full recovery. But we'll look forward to having you with us as long as you're willing and able and of good spirits to do so. My opinion would be that when I signed up for it, I was told that it'd be a 2-year commitment, and so that's kind of what I've imagined. And when I think, we're in Title III and there's 11 titles, well, that's a lot, but as I've looked at some of the other things, like particularly the fire regulations, I expect Title V personally to go by pretty quickly because we're not firefighters. And much like the building code section, where I forget who the city engineer's name is, but he explained to us that the code that we had reviewed was not a matter of life safety. We weren't making decisions on how should a building be supported so that people don't die, but more other policy decisions. I think that some of these other things, like specifically the building regulations, like the building code and some things related to that, I think will probably go pretty quickly because we don't really have, in my opinion, much to add that hasn't been already covered by state law otherwise. I think the police regulations, the health and sanitation sections, those will probably be the biggest ones. We aren't slated to review Titles 10 and 11 So I think that police regulations, Title VI, Title VII, Title IX, maybe Title VIII to some degree, will be the pieces that we have more thorough review on, but I would, I think that there will be certain things that we are able to just read and more or less just go right through, because there's probably not part of the purpose of this committee's existence is to add the human lens to it. And I think that probably, I will suppose that the fire code is probably sufficient as it is, and that whereas, because the community members don't really engage in that as they do in things like Title III. So I'm open to ideas for maybe more pre-work or how to engage more chapters. But I am committed to the 2 years myself.
I also was committed to the 2 years for the task force. I am also willing to go longer. I think words matter, and especially in our culture right now, words matter more. And I think that we need to take a look at it thoroughly. It doesn't mean we need to discuss every single bit thoroughly every time. I think there are different ways we could do it that might move quicker, but it also means people need to come prepared, do the pre-work in advance, get it to the city staff well in advance so they can do the turnaround, so that we can move quicker. I don't think that we can just skip sections and not discuss them, because we've had disagreement even in this group. So I'm willing to commit to whatever time it takes, but I also want to be efficient.
Don, I think you're the only person we haven't heard from specifically.
I'm with it the same. It's whatever commitment it needs, but I understand we need to expedite, but also go through it carefully so that we're not missing any parts of it. But I agree that there are going to be sections that we were aware of them with the fire codes and stuff like that, but that should speed those things up a bit more on it. So I think just a commitment to maybe a little more pre-work, a little more defer back to them for finding out more information versus extended debating on topics. So when we find topics that get a little more contentious, we maybe need to go, hey, time out, let's put this one back, bring it back, versus keeping the debate going on.
I think that's fair. Shelley?
Could we do more pre-reading, like get ahead? Just like
work
this?
more sections instead of 2 chapters, maybe work 3 chapters like
Right,
that.
we could read and maybe have any big questions or major disagreements prepared ahead of time. Like, we're discussing this one, but she was pre-reading, she's already read the rental code, she may or may not have done her comments. But if we're committed to being ahead and having comments in maybe within a week of the meeting instead of 2 weeks, which might be a challenge for people, I don't know everybody's schedule, but we could move faster that way, I think.
As far as city staff opinion, have members been, I'll maybe use the word timely in providing feedback, or are you noticing late feedback that then makes the review process?
No, not typically.
Okay.
But, there is a bit of a crunch around it when we have to get our work done as well. And then sometimes things come up, like, for instance, with the rental licensing chapter, we had a recent fire at an apartment building, and now the fire chief has asked to have some significant input into the rental licensing process because of that.
So I'm gonna be very arbitrary and abstract, but if we were to take on maybe 30% more material every time, how would that impact the city's ability to provide the meaningful input and prepare and not add to the workload significantly?
I think that staff will be able to keep up with whatever the task force is doing, and basically we've been adjusting as you're. If you slow down, we slow down. If you speed up, we speed up. So, and I think that we will continue to be able to do that going forward.
Okay.
But maybe we will just, like I said, if we can, those things that have some unknowns to it that we need to kick back for more research, instead of debating those, let's wait till we find that information out, and then the debate may take a lot less time with more information.
sense.
And if the task force wants to, like, for instance, if we run late this evening, maybe we extend it a little longer to get this chapter done, that type of thing might help, when we need to. And we don't anticipate that, but it does happen sometimes.
Yeah, I think we've only gone long once, and that was actually last month, to
Yes.
my knowledge. Do any of our other regular participants, Dan or Council or Chris, do you gentlemen have any thoughts you'd like to share on the topic?
I'm gonna echo what Michelle said already. We're gonna have sections. I don't think we're gonna have a whole lot of questions when we start looking at business regulations, things that have a lot greater impact on the community, we're gonna spend more time on them. But there's other things in there that I think everybody's not gonna have a whole lot of suggestions on.
Yeah.
It'll go quicker.
I'd like to add that, as we were talking about some sections you think you're gonna go through fast, I'm not sure you will.
Okay.
Typical council.
We went through all these, so it's, like you get into the building regulations, the thing that stands out is multiple dwellings and our property code maintenance ordinance. That's a big subject in the city right now, and lots of people are talking to us about it, so you're gonna be talking about it, it won't be something that just passes over.
Gotcha.
It's
So-
gonna happen.
Maybe on that kind of stuff, what you're talking about, like the rental licensing and that, maybe there's a listing of things that have been brought to you guys that can get taken to us, so we can think about that and wrap our heads around it more so to help expedite some of this stuff, rather than coming in and go, okay, here's my grocery list, this is what we wanna. So as you're reading it, you're understanding, here's the things they're looking at, this is maybe some changes, and then you can look at it from a different, well, I never thought of that, well, how about this? Kind of a thing. So that it's not, pardon the phrase, cold turkey, so to speak.
Sure.
On and any section we get to like that, if there's that kind of input, that kind of depth, Chris, then that would be a good one to have a pre-list to kind of think about a little more.
Steve?
Yeah, background. There's background.
More background.
Well, if you guys are getting Q&A from the citizens, we should be aware of some of those topics. For example, like allowing parking on the streets at night, right?
Yep.
I'm not sure which section that is, but
Yep.
very controversial, I suppose.
It's in there.
There's real strong opinions on both sides.
Correct. Right.
Yep. So sorry, go ahead, Sean.
One more thing, I'd also like to point out too that last month, several of us did not come prepared. We had not turned in homework, and it was a first read for some of us. I think there were like 3 of us. And so I think it's a responsibility issue on our end as well. I know I was one of the people who did not complete the work ahead of time, and that could also impact discussion. I had a work crisis and just couldn't get it done. So that's also something we can keep in mind as we go through this.
I think those are all very good suggestions. Thanks for having the dialogue. I think that that we're involved in good work, that our fellow residents and people of the city deserve thoughtful attention to, because they matter. And I think that's why we signed up. And so thank everyone. It's been, I think this is our year mark now. So thank everyone for the time that you've given. It's been interesting, and I'm excited to see where we continue.
Happy anniversary.
Maybe one other thing, if we want to take one more chapter per meeting, catch up or whatever that is, maybe we need to plan for an extra hour, and if we end early. 5:30 to what?
I personally would not have a problem, generally, the thought of extending it 30 minutes, given my personal schedule, but I would love to know what other people's thoughts are. Maybe it depends if we know that this is a very big section and we know going into it versus ad hoc decisions.
Yeah, I would prefer pre-planning. I have animals at home. I need to know whether I feed them before or after. It sounds silly, but it's kind of at that odd time of day.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think I'd leave that to Michelle's discretion. If in your years of experience, this is a big topic and we have a lot to bite off, I think sending an email along with the quorum asked, saying, hey, this might go a bit long, You know, we can always end the meeting at 7:30, but if we can, you know, be prepared with the thought, well, we might end up going an extra 20 minutes
Okay,
to save a month. That might be worth it.
good.
You know, I was thinking, planning ahead, some ways to expedite our discussion. For one thing, when I signed up, I said, I'm going to go through all of it, and I'm going to go through as thorough as I can. So I don't want to let that down, you know. That should happen. You know, my desire is that should happen. But anyway, to expedite this, one approach could be have, say, 2 chapters put in there and said, and maybe the city staff might know, hey, this may be a longer discussion kind of one, and this is a shorter one. So get prepared for the next one also during the, you know, like today we'll discuss this, but hey, that next one is a longer one. Let's have all the questions ready or ahead of time. Some way of expediting it.
Sure.
You know, I'm not saying
You know,
it should be that way, just
We can
saying
try
that there
this
may
and
be ways.
we can try it and see if it's making a difference, and then adjust as needed.
Okay. I think that'll conclude that topic. That takes us to the final review of Title III, Chapter 24. Do city attorneys or staff have any comments? I think this was the one that, so this is not included in your packet tonight. In your packet is just chapters 25 and 27. So this was specifically about pawnbrokers and secondhand dealers. There was an outstanding question on what we were doing with the bonding.
And I think that if there were no concerns with the changes to the languages that you saw, the yellow highlighted in your backgrounds, if you had no concerns with that, I think there was still just the discussion on whether or not we would add the bond requirement. And I believe we have somebody in the audience here that would also like to add input on that, correct?
Is that a yes?
That's a maybe.
Okay. Well, now or never, sort of, so.
Well, right, Darren Van Helden representing Quantum America.
Would you mind coming to the table and speaking in the microphone so we could?
In between these two commissioners?
It's
or
fine,
task force?
it's fine. We're not that formal, Darren.
Again, Darren Van Helden representing Quantum America. I guess a little unsure that was the only topic maybe on the table for discussion tonight. I guess I can keep comments limited to that.
Well, I'll give you a point of order.
Sure.
Right now, we're talking about Chapter 24. So if you have
Right.
something about Chapter 24, if you have other things for sexually oriented businesses or fireworks, let us know.
I think we're, no, we don't.
Okay.
No, I don't, no, we don't. You know, to the bond requirement, you know, a question that occurred to us is what's the trend? You know, as you look at and thank you, to all of you for taking the time, significant to accomplish this code review. You know, what's the intent of that? Is it to streamline? Is it to modernize? What might the trend be on these bond requirements? You know, for us, it's something that we find in other communities that we do business in. It's a fact of life. But again, why have this if it's not material any longer? If other communities aren't adding these bond requirements, why go down that road? Why force others to do it? That does tie in our mind to, you know, as you look at the potential changes to the definitions of secondhand goods, you know, are more people or fewer people falling under regulation in terms of needing to be licensed as such? That, you know, what size businesses are those? Is that bond sufficient? Is that even an issue that the city or law enforcement finds, you know, that transactions occur and see themselves come full circle to the point where, you know, getting into that whole issue is even relevant, right? Are there other similar transactions that go on generally in business that there is no bond requirement for, but yet a similar transaction or misstep might occur? I think there were some recent skid steers that may have been sold that, you know, weren't owned as such, and, you know, maybe that falls on, I mean, they're not titled items either. You know, we see lawn equipment, you know, one of the things that we have always advocated for is just as level of a playing field as possible within the communities in which we do business for those that trade in secondhand goods. And, you know, what's the climate with that? What is it that law enforcement is seeing as problem items? Are those captured under the secondhand goods definitions? You know, we get into and are happy to report all the transactions that we have to law enforcement, and would just hope that others are in the same boat. You know, again, that playing field is level and all these transactions are being reported to law enforcement to ensure public safety, better public good, right? So just some comments along those lines. I don't think there's a whole lot that you guys are touching that, you know, that we would have issue with. Just generally supportive of the effort to streamline, modernize, keep things up to date. But would certainly note, you know, the challenge that you all have ahead of you to go through all this, referencing or thinking back to all the times that, you know, we've engaged in reviewing certain sections of code and how much energy goes into that. And, you know, what are the unintended consequences of, you know, changing this one line and how that reads. You know, I'm looking to the attorneys here, but, you know, just so that, again, everybody stays on the same playing field as much as possible, and, you know, that we don't create hardship for certain companies that, you know, might only be touching this stuff, and are they really under the regulations now, or aren't they going forward? Same question. I guess that'd be the only thing I'd say at this point. Happy to answer any questions if there are some.
Shelley?
What exactly is your relationship to Pawn America?
They're a client of mine.
Okay.
Yep.
And you are their attorney? You're
Not an attorney, just used to work with the company and represent them with some municipal issues as they come up, licensing and so forth. And,
Okay.
right.
And are you asking to have a removal or a waiver of the bond requirement?
No, just level playing field, and if it's even required, you know, what's the current trend? You know, of course, we don't want to tie up anything additional than what's needed. You know, do these issues show up right now in the city of Burnsville? Is this a requirement that we need? You know, is it just that something flags in other communities that these bond requirements exist, you know, and hey, you know, maybe we should do it too? You know, is there evidence that the surety is being needed? Is it necessary? Is it a level playing field with other industry, business sectors, retail sectors where similar transactions may go on and no requirements in place, right? So posing the question, we can go either way, right?
Okay, understood, thank you. I just
Right.
wanted to understand the
Sure.
ask.
So maybe the question you raised, Darren, is, are there other secondhand good businesses in Burnsville that aren't under this chapter or aren't subject to this bond question?
Or the regulations in general, right?
Correct?
Right.
Are you aware of something?
Again, depends, you know, this is where leaning a little bit on law enforcement experience to help answer that. You know, what else comes up that could fall into this? Certainly, secondhand goods are bought and sold every day, right? Occasionally, some of those aren't lawfully owned, and they're presented as such, you know, and that doesn't necessarily happen in our world. It can, that's why all these regulations are in place, right? You know, as you look at it, like electronics, for example, if you wanted to look at what's included or has been typically included, right? Electronics and audiovisual equipment, does that include game systems and games? You know, that's not defined as we see it, depending on how that's read, right? We report all those transactions. We report every transaction. There could be others out there that, you know, might be involved in those types of transactions.
GameStop, is that kind of what you're saying?
Something of that sort, sure, you know, and are they reporting? I think something shy of 10 businesses in Burnsville are licensed as secondhand goods dealers right now. You know, we don't really know. I mean, even years ago, it was always tough to get an accurate read on who all's doing this because people choose to do it, coming and going. You know, they might do some used business in this sector that, you know, nobody really discovers, right? So, I think, you know, the greatest, just the partnership with law enforcement to understand what they see on a day in, day out basis, and are these issues still relevant in terms of the bond requirement and so forth? You know, is it a problem? If it's not a problem, let's modernize the code, not include it. Why create an additional requirement where there's no need to do so? Again, I don't have the background other than what I saw, you know, in the background that you guys had today from a few other communities as to why they do it, not speaking about experience or frequency of use, right?
We don't have a law enforcement partner here tonight that can speak to the law enforcement issues, and I certainly won't attempt to either. to your general comment about modernizing the code, I can say that we have defined a couple of other items as secondhand goods that weren't previously defined, specifically home appliances and game cards. I would imagine that means like Pokemon, that type of thing.
Is that what that means? We're scratching our heads a little bit.
Not like,
also,
not
right?
like your bicycle, 52 card, not that. But the collector cards that sometimes can be worth some significant money. And in addition, we've also clarified the language around what is a recorded or reportable transaction, and clarified that that an exemption to this is the purchase or consignment in bulk and retail sale of new or used merchandise from a merchant. So to clarify that the business-to-business type transactions are not, I would say that we've decreased the scope there and lessened the burden. The only burden that I am particularly aware of that we are considering adding is the bonding issue, as I've read through the section. I don't know if city disagrees or if anyone disagrees with that statement. But I think the other things that we've tried to modernize is that we are standardizing on the ARS, and that you can certainly use paper forms as necessary to expedite your internal processes, but you have to use the ARS ultimately. So I think those are pretty much the major changes, and they'd be highlighted in yellow in our packet.
Would there be new potential licensees with the addition of those two new categories of home appliances or game cards?
I don't think so.
No.
And
Because again, to us, if we're focused on level playing field, and not that that's anyone else's obligation to do so, but some degree of equity across the secondhand goods market within Burnsville, right? I don't even know the technical term, but would a manufactured gemstone fall under the regulations as they exist right now? That's a new thing.
Could you define that term for me? I'm not sure.
Fake stones, fake diamonds, or manufactured diamonds, there's still a fair amount of, there's
Gotcha.
significant value in those items.
Okay.
But do they qualify under the definition as something that would be required to be reported on or hit that milestone, right? So again, to us, it's about who falls under the licensing requirement under the definition of those secondhand goods. Then with respect to the reporting system, somewhat alluded to it earlier that we're happy to and have always reported every transaction we make, but under strict reading, would we need to? I mean, we would want to for a variety of reasons, but there might be others around that don't want to report any transaction beyond those that are defined as secondhand goods reportable transactions. Again, another question perhaps for law enforcement, but just an interesting dynamic.
Does council have any comments on any of those, on the definitional items? Have we?
Well, the issue of the stones or the jewels, I would say the way our precious metals are, precious gems, precious metals, and jewelry definitions are written right now, are written in a way that sort of assumes they're natural occurring, not
Man-made.
fakes or man-made or whatever. So we could make an edit here tonight that would, I'm trying to think of the correct word. I don't know, what did you use?
Manufactured, and I don't know
Synthetic.
if synthetic,
Yeah.
I think that might be right.
We could call it natural, precious, or synthetic stones.
Lab created.
Yeah. Go through and that would capture that.
And that's just a for instance, but, that's where the magic kind of is, from how we view it in terms of what that level playing field looks like, right? Is it a burden to report? It's become so easy and so ingrained in our system that no, it's not, right? Everything's videoed, we've got the photographic documentation for all the transactions we do. It's a good internal practice, it helps from our audit function on the internal side again, right? Does that apply to others? Don't know. From a public safety perspective, we think that adds value to law enforcement to have all those transactions documented. You know, not sure if the ordinance is constructed right now truly requires that or not. Again, for you guys to weigh out and make recommendations on, right?
Well, I think to answer that specific question, I don't believe that every single transaction that happens at a secondhand good dealer is required to be recorded, is my understanding. There's a certain list of things that we do expect. So if is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
That's correct.
So I think it might be fair for me to maybe say if I was going to I was gonna bring in a canoe, for example, that wouldn't be in the list. So I don't know if we're looking to expand to all items and if that would be, so I'll ask that back as a question to you. Do you think that the list should be longer, or is your question?
We have for years and intend to continue to report every transaction that we have. Whether it's a video game coming in or a canoe coming in, or, that's, in the spirit of the relationship with law enforcement, that's been our practice, and for the foreseeable future will remain our practice. How's that for an answer?
That works. Michael?
So, with the collectible cards thing, now, people have what they call like lots or whatever, like where we might have tens of thousands of cards, because maybe grandfather or something died or whatever. If I brought in those 10,000 cards, most of them are probably garbage, but there could be some good stuff in there that's worth high value. Would they have to account for every single one of those 10,000? Because, a lot of those cards would be, like, if I go to, like, a Magic store, like a GameStop, or like a game store, not a GameStop, and took that in there, like, they're not going to account for everything. It'll be in their inventory, but they're not going to count every single card, like Forrest from 1993 or something like this, every single one like that. Because that would just take literally forever. Usually if something doesn't have much value, it's just like bulk is what they would be considered. So is that something that they would have to do? Is that something what like game stores would have to do too? Account for every single one? Or is it like things of certain value? That was one of the things I didn't know.
Jared or Joel, do you have comments on that? Like a games by James, they commonly deal in Magic or Pokemon or something.
There's like a Magic store in Burnsville too.
Yeah, and it's
or
very
like a
common that
comic
they
book
bring
store or
in
something.
secondhand
Yeah.
goods to Michael's
And-
point.
Joel, I assume that
The recorded or reportable transaction definition, refer you to on page 4.
'Cause you can have cards that are worth thousands, but the majority of cards in the game are gonna be worth like a penny.
So I think that the issue there is that we define the type of entities doing business and recorded or reportable transaction, but with the inclusion of, say, the games, the game cards specifically, those like the games by James, those wouldn't typically be considered a second. To my knowledge, I don't believe they're licensed as a secondhand good dealer in the city.
Mr. Chair, with the change to game cards, if they're doing the business of game cards, then they would be required to get a license from the city. They would be required to record or report the transactions of the defined secondhand goods. And consequently, they would, unless you have an exception as drafted in the bulk purchase or consignment part of the definition of the transaction, have to report them.
And then I feel like if you do that, then almost everybody's just gonna go put them on like Craigslist or Facebook instead, like to sell stuff. And then you're gonna have no way of tracking, I would imagine. Like I would almost think you would only want to track stuff of certain value, but I don't know. 'Cause the thing is with those things, they fluctuate in price too. It's like,
Chair, if I may, I think if I recall correctly, the addition of game cards came because law enforcement informed us that this is one of the categories by which they're seeing
Oh, for
a
sure.
lot of stolen goods in. So that's why we've added it. To the extent that that's helpful.
But things that need to be recorded, would it make sense to put a minimum value on it? Things over X dollars, record it. You know, my baseball cards from 1969 that for the Twins that are worthless, probably not worth recording a 50-cent card or a, you know, a wheat kind of pen, you know, the old pennies, you know. There's probably some limit to this thing, is probably for efficiency.
Well, yeah, because the store wouldn't do it. It wouldn't be worth it for them to ever take in bulk ever again.
Because they pay by item, is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they'll go through it. They'll have somebody like look through it and everything like that.
Sorry, what I meant was,
Oh.
do they pay by item to put things into the ARS?
Not any longer,
Okay.
correct?
I was confused by that also, because I think that when we initially, the last time this ordinance was overhauled, they were paying by item, and that's why there was a lot of discussion about, it was like $1 per item. I think the system now has been upgraded, and I'm not familiar with it by any means, but I don't think that they have to pay by item anymore.
So, for the benefit of others maybe, what I know about it is, that's correct, there used to be a transaction fee on each of the reportable transactions. In Burnsville's case, I think that's been eliminated. You know, there's been a change in the reporting systems. Far more all electronic now, so much easier, more simplistic to do, which is one of the reasons why we don't mind doing that. I won't say incurring that burden, but, you know, it's customary for us at this point. It's become so much, you know, it's streamlined, it's integrated into our business operation to do so. And the cost of each of these electronic transactions is so de minimis that, you know, we're all right with that. You know, if there was still a fee structure attached to it, then you might have had a different answer earlier about, you know, what our practices are and, you know, maybe how we choose to look at that going forward. But, you know, we've truly viewed this as a law enforcement partnership for years. You know, and the other thing I should mention, you know, you mentioned Craigslist or Facebook, some of these national databases do scrub and pull from those sources as well. So that was one of the compelling features of going with the hierarching national databases, is that they were able to add in these other platforms that would show up, you know, that some of the less robust systems of the past just weren't able to do in a timely fashion. So between the reduced cost and the increased spread of what they can look at for items, you know, when law enforcement queries that, let's populate the databases.
So, a suggestion might be that we would assign a nominal dollar amount per individual item, and say if it's less than $1, that we ignore it and it not be recorded. I mean, someone's not gonna sell a gun for $1, and guns, you have to be an FFL anyway, so you'd have to register those weapons, regardless. Or perhaps we also consider that, in Michael's point about a lot, and you bring in 10,000 cards, and maybe together they're all worth $500, so we say in a lot, then some value over $100. I don't know. That if it's under $100, you don't have to, record it. That's an idea.
So, can I ask Darren a question? What value would be, what should the threshold be if we do something like this? I mean, in your business, or your experience with Pawn America, you know, I can't imagine the police are gonna get involved for a $35 trading card, right? There's some,
Unless there was $135
Right.
dollar
But-
cards.
Yeah,
There's
unless
some-
it was a
some
part of some
level.
other series of transactions that had issues also. You know, I'm not the best one to answer that question, you know, because if it's your $35 or $25 item that's not reported, that was taken as a part of, you know, family heirloom type stuff, I don't know, right? I mean, stretching a little bit, I mean, we're trying to prevent things from happening. I think in our world is the goal of reporting all these transactions and making that available. You know, the number of occurrences that we have, you know, in Burnsville is incredibly small. against the total percentage of transactions. That's a great thing. Not suggesting to change things, but what's the right dollar figure? I think the category approach is what's used in many other municipalities. You know, if there's a de minimis amount where it just doesn't make sense to track, you know, that'd almost be a law enforcement question, you know, what their theory of policing is, or how they choose to look at that. Because for us, it doesn't matter. Somebody might send me a different answer, which I can forward to you, Mr. Chairman, and get that out, but, you know, we're accustomed to reporting DVDs.
Shelley?
Yeah, as I've listened to the discussion, I've thought of jewelry stores who may sell a used piece of jewelry and not necessarily have a license. The GameStops who have electronic gaming systems, which in some cases have very significant value. And according to the regulation, and to accomplish the spirit of the regulation, I believe that what we have done is write the new regulation updates in such a manner as those places are now required to be licensed and to report these sales, to aid the police, and to help the community ensure that they have that sense that their goods can be traced in the event that something happens to them. So I just had to look back at it because I think GameStop would now be required to be licensed if they're taking in those, and they would need to record those transactions.
Because of the type of item?
Because of
You
the-
think that is what has changed?
Absolutely. And I think that that's intentional, and I think it's appropriate, because pawnbrokers have had a bad rap, okay? And I think that's part of what he's trying to bring to the commissioners here, is that they have to do a lot of extra work because of the history and the plague on the pawn industry, when you have a GameStop who can just as easily take in a stolen gaming system and it would never be recorded. So if you're a criminal, where are you going to get rid of those goods? Same would be true of a jewelry. If there are jewelry stores that are also taking in occasional sales of value. Yes?
Michelle?
GameStop is licensed reseller,
Thanks for pointing that.
but I believe that's because of the video games,
Right.
not the
Not the cards.
cards.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there potentially could be additional resellers that would be added because of this. And I would like to, we took this language straight from the police department, home appliances and game cards. But I think maybe we should be a little more descriptive and say, number one, small home appliances were what they mean, not refrigerators. That wasn't what they were, people aren't lifting refrigerators and stuff like that. It's like the Ninja air fryers and those types of things that are getting stolen, and maybe specifically say collector game cards. And I'm not opposed to like a dollar amount. I don't know what you would feel would be fair, $20, $50, if it's less than, but like Darren said, it could be somebody's
Shelley?
sentimental.
I don't think we can really set a minimum amount. And the reason is, we don't know what value something really has, and it's a big loophole. Because I think in the end, like he was talking about with the cards, you've got a lot of 500 cards. One of them might be worth $10 today, could be worth $1,000 tomorrow.
Yeah, but you go based on what it is today. You wouldn't go based on what
At the time of
theoretically it could
transaction.
be.
Right, but how do you know the value of something, and who judges that? What's a Ninja air fryer worth?
Oh, I mean, there's pricing guides on, like, say, Magic the Gathering. There's so many different databases. You could go, there's
It's like
like.
coins and stamps.
But as a
There's a
business
market.
owner,
There's,
do you want to try and sort through each single one as it comes in? I think that's more of a burden.
Most of them do that already when they're buying cards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna look at it.
Because they have like, what is it? Not like algorithm, but where you have a mid-price of things, and then they'll give you about 60% of that. Like of what it
Right.
would sell like online, because of course they have to make a profit off
What
of
I'm
it.
saying is that it applies to one type of goods addressed in the description. And if you try to apply a dollar amount, it has to be something that works for all of the type of goods in the list. And I don't think that's a reasonable request to put on a business owner to discriminate.
Well, I think,
Because that's gonna become burdensome and overreach and regulatory nightmare to manage as well.
I would suggest that we could say $5 for the item. I mean, if it's not worth $5, unless it's a trading card, I don't know why they'd be taking it, frankly, because how are they gonna make much of a profit off of $3?
From
If they
what I
take it to
recall,
sell it,
because I used to work
some value.
in in that industry. I mean, I still kind of do online sales. Most of the stuff that's stolen is binders and decks. I mean, if people can, if we're talking about stolen goods, I mean, that's typically what it is. People are gonna steal decks while they're like at, tournaments or conventions or something like that, or they'll steal binders.
A whole collection.
Yeah, a whole collection of stuff, or at least like a binder full of stuff. And people don't put garbage cards in binders. And while decks may have cards that aren't worth very much, I mean, most decks are probably worth like $300 in totality, at least. Like if we're talking about Magic the Gathering. I don't know Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! That much anymore, but I know Pokemon's bigger than it used to be. And I'm pretty sure those things are probably around $200, $300 each if they have like decks or whatever.
Steve?
I'd propose $35 for an individual or a lot. So we don't have a lot of transactions of low value being recorded. I think that's just a burden on businesses and people.
Could you clarify, are you limiting that to cards in
Nope.
particular or $35 in general?
Yep. If you buy something, either a lot of stuff or an individual thing, your Ninja Fryer, it's not, if the person buying it's not over $35, they don't have to record it.
I would be opposed to that in particular. For example, I have a music box that belonged to my mother. If it was stolen, I think it's worth $25 on eBay right now, but it is of immense value emotionally, and it's an heirloom in our family. It doesn't have monetary value. I don't think you can track a person's goods by monetary value. And I think that the people in this community would want to see any stolen goods tracked.
So are there,
Okay.
I think that jewelry is an interesting exception. Those types of things stands out. But I would wonder about power tools and computers and home appliances below $35. It's not to say they don't exist, but I don't have a rice cooker. My parents passed down, and it's not to say that someone couldn't. But I think that
Yeah.
your point about heirlooms, I think is a fair point. But I wouldn't consider my VCR an heirloom. I consider it antiquated, but not an heirloom.
I think you're right, and that's why I asked if it would apply to certain types of goods.
Is there language that our very smart lawyer friends could think of that might satiate this?
On the fly
Poor
here.
Nancy.
Well, I think you get into some trouble trying to parse out, your antiquated VCR might not be a big deal, but then when you're talking about electronic audio or video equipment, you get into your PS5s and whatever, and then you're talking about hundreds of dollars, so.
Yep. $35. What do you think of the dollar threshold? Does that make sense to you two, lawyers?
Chair?
Yes.
Just, if I may, Erica was just explaining to me that for all her research through all the different cities that she's looked at, none of them had a dollar amount.
Well, that's fair. So they probably just pass the burden on to the secondhand goods dealer and say if it's
Record everything.
nothing,
I-
all of it.
You can do with that what you like, but just for your
We're more
information.
innovative.
Modern.
Well, Steve's saying he won't steal for anything less than $35 is what I'm hearing. Okay.
We're gonna have a dump taller than.
I just
Buckhill.
feel if you
We're
add
innovative.
collectibles, that really screws things up, though.
I
If
think
you're
that,
trying to make them count for every single one.
I think that, Michael, you're right, that they are gonna count every single one. And if other cities are not putting a dollar amount, and those businesses can still thrive and people can still sell secondhand goods or try to pawn them, that means there's still a market for them. And is it possible that someone's $3 trinket might be turned away because they just don't want to deal with it? Sure. But I think that if we fall in line with the other cities, I think that's probably a reasonable standard to carry to your point on equity, on equal treatment. So I like the language as is. I'm fine with it personally.
Okay,
Do you mind
record
if,
everything.
Chair, do you, and members, do you mind if I clarify small home appliances and collector game cards? Because not like, your playing deck of cards, not those kinds of cards.
That's collectible cards.
Collectible
Yeah,
cards.
Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like old baseball cards, football cards.
Collectible
But like,
cards.
there's certain things that just are worth nothing, really. The only reason stores take them on is because every once in a while they can sell them for 10 cents. Like, if somebody needs a forest or something like that, they can buy it. They may got that for like a quarter of a penny or something like that.
If
That's
they,
the only reason they would take that on.
if they have no value like that, then why are we wasting so much time on it? And I don't mean to use the word wasting derogatorily,
Sure.
I guess, but
a fair
I think
question.
that it is, if they're not gonna deal with them and it's worth a few cents to somebody, and they don't wanna deal with recording them, maybe they're not a marketable good that would be worthy of this.
Not unless you do a note that you took in 200 Pokemon cards on this date and time from that person, end of discussion.
Are we saying they have to account for every single card, though? I guess that's what
That's
that's
the
what
nature
my
of the language.
interpretation
Yes.
was.
That's what it
That's
Every
what the
says.
single
language
forest,
says.
every single
That's what it
swamp, every
says.
single,
You don't put a dollar value on it. That's what it says.
even
And
if
if they
it's,
don't, they have several options. They can either comply with the statute or they can refuse the good if it's not worth their time.
I feel like they would do the latter most of the time, unless they saw some real value in that lot.
Unless they're making a significant amount of money
Yeah.
anyways, I don't know
'Cause
that,
that's a lot.
in
of-
the end,
that's
that
a
would
lot of
cost
time.
them.
And I
Going through
think
10,000 cards.
to ground ourselves back to why this chapter exists is to protect people and to limit the ability of people to profit from stolen goods. So if the good is of no value, then it's hard, and which is the same reason why we have the exception for when you donate to places, because we say, well, there's no monetary value that you can derive from that. So that's why we've excluded them from the list of places that we require to record every transaction in.
I thought that was the whole purpose of putting in a minimum value to record it. So you don't have to waste so much time on all the non-value stuff. And so you can record the stuff that is valuable, so it'd be easier to record that.
Now, I think he's talking about, like, when I get rid of my appliances and different things that are in perfectly good condition, but now I'm not gonna use them and I could sell them, but I take them to that Second Unique, or I take them to Salvation Army, or take, those appliances then are exempt from that part of it. But if I'm going to Pan America and I'm gonna turn that in, cause I got a tool and I wanna get some bucks out of it, that's a different transaction, because I'm getting something back from it.
Right.
In money, monetarily means. Otherwise, if the donation is a donation, there's no money I'm getting back. I'm just putting it there so somebody else gets use out of it. So
I'm
there's
just
a
saying, when
difference
people,
between the two.
if people are stealing like a lot of cards, or like a binder full of cards, maybe they don't even know much about these collectible things, so they may not know the value themselves. Like, people break into like card stores, people break into people's, cars. You could have binders of Magic cards in there. These people may have no idea what the hell Magic the Gathering is, but they know it's probably worth money because they know somebody who maybe played it or something like that, or heard of a card. So they'll take it to the thing and give them the whole lot of it. They're not gonna take only single, cards of it, because they don't know anything about it. Now, if they do know something about it, they're only gonna take the valuable stuff and just throw away the rest.
I think we understand the buying and lot, and I think we've kind of gotten hung up on one type of goods here, and I would like to make a proposal that we move on. I'd like to make a motion.
Motion to table?
Motion to the
I'll
table,
second.
please.
Conan? Wait, we actually should vote on that.
Yeah, you can just,
Chair,
it needs a
I
second.
get some clarification. What are we're tabling this entire?
No, just the
section?
discussion on cards specifically, and the enumeration of those 8 points there, the types of goods. So we're including them
Okay.
So do you want us to bring this back next month?
No, I don't think anyone wants that.
We want to quit talking about it.
So,
So instead of a motion to table, perhaps we just get a motion to approve.
Oh, sorry, yes, I would like to, I'll restate my
Okay.
motion if allowed.
so I don't think we resolved, I think we actually haven't resolved the bonding issue though.
Right.
Correct.
So maybe we could talk about the bonding issue. Or I don't know how to do this separately.
Yeah.
I'm open to suggestions.
Can someone remind me what the bond is for?
And how would you lose the
I skimmed the
bond?
material and I don't know what a bond is,
Why?
why you have a bond, what it protects against, what,
So, reading through the packet tonight, Minneapolis, I think, was the only one that was different. But the other cities, it's basically if a pawn shop breaks the law and takes something they shouldn't have, and they can't give you back that thing because it's no longer there, the bond is used to reimburse the person who has incurred a loss. Minneapolis does it a little bit different. They, as I was reading it, they just say, if you break the rules, we take your money. And there's no money that goes to a consumer who's been ripped off.
They keep it.
They just keep it. And it's an incentive to make sure
It goes to
that,
the city council.
that they don't break the law. So those are the two
so they take in
purposes.
stolen goods, not record it, and sell it.
Yeah,
uh,
the
And
bond goes to
somehow
pay.
someone finds out about that, I would get reimbursed for my stolen item?
Yes.
If you
Are
made a
bonds covered by
claim that
insurance?
they didn't,
Bonds are a
That
type
they
of-
should have
they could, yeah.
taken more care?
Yes, Darren.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify a little bit in that
Please
process?
do,
'Cause
correct me where I
I
got it
started cringing in my chair just a touch. We do our level best to try to determine if an item is believed to be stolen on the front end. If we think it is, we turn it away or turn it over to law enforcement. We report every item. Again, this is us, maybe not some of the other licensees, but it might be weeks after. There's a holding period that we can't touch that item for, correct? That's spelled out in this chapter. It might, it takes time for somebody to discover that something might be stolen, right? So to give the process time to function, to let that come back, items can be held, items can be confiscated, and if that licensee wasn't able to make good on keeping that customer whole that could have bought that item after the fact, right? Then that bond exists. We return items all the time, buy them back from customers, and haven't had problems with that. But that's, again, just us.
Go to,
Yeah. Listening to all this, I was thinking, if there's a system already in place in a particular store for reporting, and it's, from what I can see, it's not that enormous a task, then having a law for $35 or whatever, does that make sense? Let's have all transactions be reported, because from what I understand, it's not that big a deal if you have already a system. I don't know that personally, but listening to people here, that's kind of how I came up with it.
okay, thank you.
Who's all required to carry the bond then, right now? Every store that does the secondhand goods has to have the bond?
Everyone that would be
Licensee.
licensed.
Every licensee has a bond.
We don't currently have a requirement for a bond, and this was added for your consideration because other cities do require them. And whether or not you felt like it should be added or not.
Nancy,
I do not feel that it should be added. That would be my opinion.
do you have a reason?
It just seems superfluous.
Okay. Go to,
If I understand right, discussions last time, even if you have a bond, enforcing that is not an easy thing. It's an expensive one, is what I thought I heard last time, so what's the value of the bond?
so what would the process be? Could someone explain to me, if I have a good stolen and I have some sort of reason to have a case against the pawn shop who sold it, then I'm sure they would do their due diligence, but if something happens, how do
The
I?
likelihood of that ever happening just seems,
Well, the city would be,
how you would find out that your stolen item was pawned at Pan America in Burnsville, or some other unscrupulous secondhand goods seller,
Other
Well, I think
unscrupulous?
that's, I think
that you would
that's,
find that out.
that's the
Other less
question. How would the bond, how would this realistically be executed?
We had a police representative last time that discussed how the tracing of goods, and they pop up.
Sure.
So she might, or you might have a stolen good that you've reported, and all of a sudden it shows up in this system that they,
Right, but the
Have-
bond is for those things
Making
that
a
are
claim.
not
so the
done
police,
properly.
right, so the police
So it
would,
would never be recorded anywhere.
Unless you don't know about it, so it's past your window of time. I don't think it's something that happens that often. Or on that, because of the recording process already in place for that part of it, whether the bond makes sense or not, I think at this point, just because other cities have, doesn't necessarily mean, because one doesn't mean the other should have to do the same if this system is working at this time for what that would cover. I don't see a reason to just add in something else right now if you're already having, just to make sure that everybody has to do the recording properly and keep the records on it, rather than adding in another step in that if it's not needed.
has the city had incidents where they feel like they might need to enforce a bond against an existing licensee?
Joel?
Actually, the opposite. It was not put in 2010 because the city felt that there wasn't enough to justify it, given the history of operations like Pan America or others within the city. The city did not have a problem with that. And there is the practical issues, as members have identified with executed. So it was an intentional omission back in the last revision.
And has things changed enough in your knowledge to, since the 10 years?
I haven't heard anything from police on recovery of an actual item or that someone has been left without reimbursement from someone who didn't report an item or didn't expect. So I haven't heard of anything that would change that. But on the other hand, other cities, as staff have indicated, routinely put that in there. And the bond does have one other kind of secondary effect. It is a financial determination for the business to be insured by a surety company. They will not just issue a policy for Joel's goods without Joel being able to establish financial
So it's one,
history and credibility to warrant that kind. So it's like getting a mortgage. You know, it does theoretically limit the number of businesses you might get because they would not be able to enter if they don't have a history that authorizes an insurance company to be confident issuing a surety bond. But as a practical matter, Burnsville hasn't had that problem either.
Okay, Shelley?
Based on the discussion, it seems that there is relative agreement here, except on a couple of points. I would like to make a motion that we do not require a bond at this point.
Okay. So remove 324.41, bond required in its entirety. Okay. I would second that.
No, I have a question on a different section, on a revision that was
Okay.
included, so
Okay, well,
Is this two separate
I
things?
didn't know if we were
didn't-
doing that.
you could amend it,
Separate?
but it might be easier if we just handle the bond issue
Okay,
Yep.
that's
first.
fine, no.
So, the motion, as moved by Shelley, seconded by Andrew, is to remove the bond requirement, section 324.41, from the text. So there would be no bond required. It was not in the code, so we're just not adding it. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. All right, the ayes have it, so please strike the bond requirement. Nancy?
I don't have the text in front of me, I just made a note that, section 324.9, it appeared that we removed the requirement to have a bunch of descriptors of the customer and instead, just left in that, things we had talked about, that they have appropriate government ID and that the ID number be recorded. Can I assume that because we have that ID number, we don't need to keep track of how much we think they weigh and how tall they are and what color their skin is?
I think you were actually the one that requested that
Well,
removal
yeah,
because
I
it
was very
seemed
happy to see
obsolete
it.
and
I guess I'm just a
discriminatory.
little,
Yeah.
if that was indeed.
I guess our understanding from the last discussion was that it was general consensus to remove it.
Just wasn't needed. Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we agreed with you on that.
And
All right. I would move to accept 324 as amended, as published in the packet.
accepting the
Accepting
removal of the
the
bond.
changes that
Changes.
we've just made.
I'll second.
Okay. Any debate on that? Okay. All those in favor of passing 324 as presented and amended tonight, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay? The ayes have it.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you, buddy.
Darren, we're just getting to the fun stuff, fireworks.
I'm gonna stick around.
Thank you for
Fireworks.
coming tonight.
Should be able to pawn fireworks.
Okay, so that takes us to item 5, reviewing questions and comments from the task force. That was in the packet tonight. Do city attorneys and staff have anything to add?
Nothing from staff.
Do any task force members have further comments? Okay. That'll take us to the review of Title III, Chapter 25 through 27, which is our handout tonight. So, we didn't get very far on it. I had made an argument about the justification. I included in this month's comments my changed opinion after having conversation and doing some more research. So I believe that we should leave, even though I do find flaws in the research, I believe that the Supreme Court has upheld that empirical evidence is not required, that a reasoned justification is sufficient. And I would say the city has a reasoned justification. If you look at specifically the city of Elko versus Abed, that person was given the opportunity to refute the evidence that was provided by the city, and basically just said it's junk science, and the Supreme Court said not good enough. There are cases, however, where the Supreme Court, particularly in, I think it's Abilene, Kansas, county commissioners, they ruled against the body because their research was only urban focused and the setting was rural. And so they said, hey, you provided justification that this was insufficient, and they overturned it. So that leaves us at a spot where if someone would like to challenge the ordinance in court, they can, and they can present their case there. But I think, I agree with Jared and Joel that it should remain in its entirety in this section. So that takes us to reviewing 325.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
may I ask a general question? A lot of words here. I assume Minnesota has statutes. We need to replicate them, or we can't just by referral
They don't.
simplify? Or they don't have,
That's why we,
Minnesota doesn't have a bunch of stuff on this topic?
And the Supreme Court specifically said that each municipality has to provide an articulated reason justification, which is what all of B is,
Okay,
for why they have the right to regulate sexually oriented businesses.
perfect.
But
Great
the actual
question.
regulations also need to be local.
Yeah.
yeah,
Crazy.
yeah, gotta love our legislators.
There's not always logic behind decisions, it seems sometimes.
Amen.
Well, I wouldn't want to weigh in.
And if I remember right, some of the studies are questionable.
They are, yep.
So, but there's nothing else to fall back upon, is the kind of what.
Yep.
Yeah, yep.
Yep.
if you get a chance to read my one-page review, I think that I would answer those questions. But I agree, but basically the Supreme Court said that it's okay as long as it's reasoned and articulated. It doesn't have to be empirical. And if you can provide legitimate counter argument in court, then they consider that, and in some cases have ruled with the opposing party, not the municipality. So if we, I guess we don't have page numbers here, but if we look at B7, there was a comment that adult use license is not really defined. So is that, I think that's correct. There is no definition for adult use license.
I think that that's a good point, that it's not, the language isn't consistent there, and we should say sexually oriented business license.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
Related in 7, it says certain crimes, but doesn't really say what the certain crimes were. Maybe I'm missing something later in the chapter. Joel or Jared, do you think that we need to enumerate certain crimes or reference them?
Well, this is just the preparatory language. I don't think here we can use B2.
Okay.
I think when it gets down to licensing, and I think we have that in there in terms of felonies and things like that. If I recall where it is off the top of my head, but it's like it's all enumerated later in the chapter.
Okay. And then on the definitions of sexually oriented business, there's comment. Appears we're using sexually oriented businesses as the main driver, and sexually oriented motel, nude model studio, sexually oriented theaters, etc. fall under this. Is that what we're trying to do? I was just kind of curious in general. Why did we remove things like sexually oriented sauna, but keep sexually oriented theater?
Because it was not referenced
Okay.
throughout the document.
Gotcha.
So that the sauna was the only definition, so I removed that because it wasn't referenced in the body of the document.
Okay. Is there utility in keeping the definitions?
Chair, I don't know in particular about sexually oriented sauna versus some of the others, but if, and Erica, maybe you can comment on this, but when I took the, sort of the sexually oriented business and took some of those definitions, nude model studio, sexually oriented motel, I don't know if those were also only in the definition section. Is that?
Yeah, when I go through, I search the document to see if they're referenced any other place.
And it was,
So,
okay.
So sauna's the only one that wasn't referenced?
Oh, we had
Cabaret,
Oh.
Yeah.
conversation.
Cabaret.
Parlor.
yep.
Yeah, but if
Were also,
the task force wanted to regulate those businesses to the extent that they exist, you could define them in your definition section, then include them in the definition of sexually oriented business. And then it would then be regulated by the rest of the chapter.
I think that makes sense. Okay. Moving to 325, as it's been renumbered, license required. D, I made a comment that I was a bit confused on how we had settled on a 10% or greater interest. What do we do like for liquor licenses? Is it a percentage, or do we just say anyone?
I'm not aware that it has a percentage. I think
What?
anyone who is a partial owner for a liquor license.
Oh, yeah, it's 10%.
Is it 10? Oh, well, I didn't know.
It is 10%.
It is 10.
Oh, it
That's
is
in
10%.
statutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Jared, you said you had something on the previous page?
Yes, member Nice-Tune had pointed out that in the definition for specified sexual activities, B says sex acts, normal or perverted. Recommended just striking normal or perverted and just including sex acts, which I think makes sense.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Where are you at, Joe?
Specified sexual activities, B, it's in the definitions,
Okay.
and strike normal or perverted.
I think I had a comment on that as well, that clarified it without using judgmental terms. Do you have that comment?
I don't see it in this. Are you okay if we just strike it and, so that B would say sex acts, comma, actual or simulated, comma, including intercourse, oral copulation or sodomy?
I think I had proposed sex acts of any type, because I think that may actually give us a little more. I don't remember it off the top of my head now. Did my comment form with me? But I don't see it in here.
We jump to 325-4, issuance of license. Steve had suggested adding a requirement for a standalone building, no closer than 3/4 of a mile from similar businesses.
Similar to liquor law,
But not the tobacco law.
correct.
You can smoke it or never mind.
But
Do we have a, so this is the real term, I'm not just making this.
Yeah.
Do we have an erogenous zone in Burnsville? That is what it's called, where these types of businesses are specifically zoned.
We do zone where they're allowed because the court requires us to have to provide a reasonable opportunity for the location of buildings. So I believe highway commercial, I don't know what the exact designation is one of the areas that we specifically acknowledge and would be allowed to have them. Some of our industrial zones similarly would be allowed to have them, but I can't recall exactly what the zoning designations are, but that's basically consistent with what other cities have done. I think Minneapolis was the only city that recently contemplated the combat zone, Boston or New York, kind of approach from the 80s or 70s.
Which is specifically make them all be in the same spot, so you can
The
focus.
Amsterdam Red Light District is the most
Ah.
internationally known, perhaps, concentration of the businesses. But most cities try to keep them out of the general commercial retail business, with the exception of Minneapolis.
If we could
Would
spiff
there-
a part of the city.
I would,
Give it a
I would
activity.
like to see us stick with the current zoning requirement. I think that puts it pretty solidly not in residential areas. And I would be concerned, although there's not many, or maybe not even any sexually oriented businesses by our current definition, I'd be concerned if we start adding the other requirements that we risk them not like being able to exist, except for maybe one. I don't know how big the zoning is for those areas.
can we
I'm
do
kind
it
of
that way then
intrigued
and
by-
specify where they can be with this zoning comment you made? Because that's not in here.
No,
Right, that's entitled
Yeah.
to zoning.
It's where?
Title
Title
10.
10.
Title
Oh.
10. Planning Commission.
Okay.
Yeah, we won't see that.
It's coming.
Can we discuss that a little more, though? I'm kind of intrigued by your suggestion, because when you look at the community, and if we felt liquor was hazardous and having these in close proximity to each other, this was also something that we felt strongly enough to regulate in our community. Would we not also want to limit them in a space way to restrict that? I'm intrigued by that. I guess I'm kind of interested in hearing more of the thinking that you're proposing, Steve.
Well, my
Steven?
thinking was, if that's what we want for liquor, and liquor has some things we spent hours talking about, I don't know why this is different. But I didn't know that there was zoning around it. I thought it was like the Wild West. So I said, well, we gotta put a box around it somehow.
So you have it with the zoning then?
So does knowing
Yeah.
that there is zoning change your opinion?
Yes, I didn't know that.
Okay.
Because it wasn't in here.
Yeah, it's in our zoning code, it's identified by the type of business and where they can be. And we won't see the zoning code, because that's going in front of the planning commission for those edits.
Could we put a comment in, then location is controlled by zoning or something, just so when people read through this, all, okay, there's a box around it somehow. Because right now, it doesn't read that. I guess,
I
that's
would
my
suggest
whole
that,
concern was, there's no constraints.
I think,
So you could put it next to Gideon Pond, you know?
I think that makes sense, but I think that the action element will be when, if someone wants to open a business, they'll have to apply for a license. At that point, they'll know, they'll be told explicitly what the zoning ordinances are. I think that, Michelle?
So I'm looking at the code now in Title 10, and it says that the SOBs need to be 700 feet from residential, they need to be 1,000 feet from youth centers, schools, religious institutions, daycares, and other sexually oriented businesses.
So 1,000 feet, so
And
not 3/4 mile, but
no two may be located in the same building or on the same property. I didn't get to where the zoning was, but I found this right away, and I thought you'd like to know that that is covered in Title 10.
So if we wanted to make a suggestion to the planning commission, that they have a further distance from schools, that would be the appropriate place to take that.
Right now, it's 1,000 feet, which is almost half a mile, right?
about 1/4 mile.
Yeah.
Maybe just for other debate. You said other cities, does Minneapolis, they all put them in one spot?
So there's two leading theories on it. One is you split them up. The other one's called the combat zone, what Joel referred to. And I don't think there's a definitive. Boston specifically, I read about it, and they did the combat zone model. And there wasn't a particular finding that was particularly more effective at limiting vice associated or secondary effects associated than
Okay.
spreading them out across the
There's
community.
no clear path. All right.
And it does look like it's permitted in the B3 General Business District zone.
Where?
B3 General Business
Like
District.
County Road 42, is that what that is?
I don't think, I think
so.
that, I'm not good with the zoning. Somebody's gonna have to help me with the zoning.
Does that mean it would be
I
allowed
think
in
it's
a
Highway
mall?
13 would be considered like a, but I would have to pull up a zoning map to know that for sure.
Maybe as an action item for next time, when we do the final review, would it be possible to get a picture of where they're allowed, and if any exist, I don't know that they do, where they currently are in the city?
And I don't know, if this is something, Dan, do you interface with the, what is it, the planning commission?
We do.
But maybe we have a concern around this topic and what kind of box is put around it, just that they consider it in light of, and my point is in light of what we did with the liquor, as far as, how far apart standalone buildings, kind of what's the thinking around this particular topic and the zoning around it? Okay?
Have they done their review already?
No, I think they haven't started that review yet, have they?
No, they've started, but I don't know how far along they are.
They sent out that survey that Regina told us about a couple months ago.
I would like to add some commentary there. If it's general business zoning, I would like to explicitly make sure that they cannot exist in a mall where it would be easy for people to unintentionally wander in, and by that I mean children, or see things that they shouldn't.
Are stores that just sell pornography or sex toys, are they listed specifically as sexually oriented businesses? Maybe that's a,
No, I don't believe
No,
so.
because of a significant portion of its floor area.
You might have magazines
So
that are,
the answer is it depends, Mr. Chair.
okay.
the magazines are always covered.
Okay. So I think if we could see where they're zoned right now.
Does anyone know if Burnsville has any? Except for the building that's on the way to Menards that sometimes says sex stuff, toys or what have you. It varies, sometimes it's used cars, so I don't know.
Used cars and sex toys. I didn't even know that.
Do we have any licensed?
No.
No.
Are you good with that, Joe?
I did find the code in Title 10 that says retail merchandise is permitted. Anywhere retail is otherwise permitted.
So
If
someone
they
could open
devote
up
less than a substantial or significant portion of the floor area to the, well, I don't know, that's what it says there.
So
It's-
someone could have a bookshop in, say, the mall and have a rack for pornography, and that would be not substantial, and it is a retail space, so they'd be allowed to be there.
I think of, Spencer's is exactly what I was thinking. When I was a teenager, you know, they existed in the malls, and all the kids went there to look at the toys. And it was a big deal as a teenager. And I don't know if they still exist, because I don't go to the malls anymore, but.
They do. They still exist because my daughter took me back to the back section. Hey, Mom, look at this. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay.
And if it's, and oh
It's
my
still
God, it's
there.
a significant amount of their floor space
No,
evidently.
it's all the way in the back, and then you wouldn't, until you physically get back there, you get all the other stuff up front. You have to physically go all the way to the back of the store.
But
It's still in place, it's still open.
the guys is a gift shop, and they have all the sexually oriented stuff in the back. And there's no way to restrict a teenager from going into a gift shop per se. But I don't know that we need that in our community, honestly. I have grandchildren coming up to that age, I'm like, yeah, no.
Legally, however,
You can't.
you can't just say, I
Right.
don't like your kind of thing.
No, but we can restrict their locations
Well,
to
that's why
places
they're-
where we would not have youth hanging out and congregating. That's why I was intrigued by Stephen's comments.
Zoning's covering it, otherwise put a box around it somehow.
Mhm.
That was my point.
Yeah. In 325-4, I had a couple of questions on set A7 and on 10 about, we use the words reside, and it's not clear what that literally means. Like if someone lives there one day a week, is that residing? We also use words like spouse, and what if they're not married? So I'm wondering if someone could provide, help me understand the point of the residing comment or the concerns about spouses convicted of a crime.
Yeah, I think that we eliminated the reference to the spouse or residing in or whatever, when we went through the massage, and I would recommend we do the same with this.
Yeah.
Isn't it, someone could use it as a ruse to get around it?
Right, that was,
If I've been convicted, I'm gonna just put it in
My partner's name,
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
So that, yeah, we
Uh,
changed,
which we may not want that.
yeah, and I thought that was what we did in the
So we-
massage.
Right.
I think the reason we
Yeah,
got rid of it,
yeah.
massage, is because it could, you could potentially see
misuse.
a couple that one did do something wrong, but the other one should not be penalized for their massage license if they're both massage therapists. I guess that's up to the task force members if you feel the same about this.
I guess I don't, honestly, because this is a business license, not an individual license. We don't license people for,
Right. It was struck for the massage establishment, not just for, it's not for the therapy license, but for the establishment. So the significant other that you were living with, if I was denied or my license was revoked, the person that I was living with still, I could get one under theirs, but that was removed.
but you're still not a licensed therapist, so you couldn't even work there.
Right, but I could be running it under the guise of
Right, just
the person that I'm living with,
Mhm.
but that was removed from the
Right.
massage establishment, part of the code.
I guess I'm not feeling the need to be consistent for consistency's sake in this
Okay.
particular matter personally, but that's just one opinion.
Well, I understand that point. I think that the undertone of the conversation about massage businesses is we were concerned about prostitution. So, I mean, this seems as as relevant as that. I guess I'm curious, if someone, I'll ask this to the lawyers, if someone is the effective controller of the business, but they've been forbidden to do that, so you have maybe a married couple, and the husband's been charged with a crime related to this, and he's not technically on the business license, but for all practical purposes and intents, he's running the business. Does the city have recourse to go after them, or?
Could his
Well,
spouse get
it really
licensed?
depends on what the code says. If we're talking about an issue where, you have a distinction, and I think we've talked about this in other code sections, alcohol, for one, the real person in interest, who has an actual ownership interest in the business or is running the business day to day, that kind of thing. And I think that's what this provision is trying to get at, is that if you've already revoked a license for a legitimate reason, you don't want them to come back and get a license under the guise of someone else. And so the task force has to consider whether or not that's a decent regulation to have, and whether or not they want to keep that in. Michelle?
And I'm trying to remember if that was in here, but I don't remember reading it. What I was just recalling from the massage licenses, if we said they would not get a license if they were not I'm trying to remember what the language said, I'm sorry.
Something like the real party, or?
If they're not the real interested party, right? And so we can look up that similar language and maybe replace that with where this is?
Yeah.
I think I'd like to see that, because, I mean, spouse or domestic
Remember
partner,
that,
or
thank you.
boyfriend, girlfriend, or just my
Yeah.
brother or sister, I mean, anyone could be a straw runner.
Well, and I think that's why the residing with was actually inserted. If you're living with somebody, and residing implies residence, and, what percentage of your time, I'll leave that to courts, but, if there's a better word.
Would we need to define reside, or is it just,
I don't think you need to define reside.
okay,
Yeah.
let me be pedantic for 1 second. If someone comes over once a week and they sleep over, is that residing?
No.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
You're okay with
A lot
it?
of cases on determination of residency and elections and everything else.
Okay, so we are looking for, I believe we're looking for some proposed language from Michelle to clarify the spouse thing
Yeah.
to be more aligned with how we determine it for the massage parlors.
Yes.
Okay, I think that jumps us forward very far.
Very far, nice.
Yes.
How many pages?
So that does take me specifically to 325(8) and subsection, well, F, I guess, which references subsection B7. I was confused having read through this, because it says it does not apply to sexually oriented motels. Could someone explain, not what sexually oriented motels are, but do we prohibit them? Do we allow them? And I was confused by it saying it does not apply to, if that meant that.
Sure, what section are you at?
So 325(8), oh, sorry, yeah, 8. And then,
Okay.
Let's-
F. And then go to the next page and go F.
and then look at F.
Okay.
Yeah.
Says D7 does not apply.
That makes sense. So what was your question there, Andrew?
Are sexually oriented motels allowed?
Yeah, I would think, by the way the language is written, I assume so. They're renting a room for an hour as an adult, they can do what they want in that room. They can't restrict what you do in a hotel room. Or
Somewhere
motel,
in here
sorry.
it said, I don't know, it said 10 hours.
Yeah, if you
Hours,
rent it for
whatever
less
the-
than 10 hours.
Yeah,
Because it defined it as that, but it was, I'm still a bit fuzzy then, is that correct? That we do allow sexually oriented hotels? Okay.
But Chair, just to be clear, I think, is that one of the definitions that got struck and then needs to be put back?
I remember.
Maybe
No, I
not,
think
because
that
it's
was
already,
still
There was 10 hours or, yeah, I
No, it-
remember that.
It's
Less
on-
than
it's
still
in there. Still,
there,
it's
okay.
not been struck.
Okay.
Is that Fantasy Suites?
No, that's gone, that's been gone a long time.
But that was one?
No,
No.
I didn't even know such a place existed. I feel so naive.
Yeah, we're sitting up the hillside,
I
35
don't think
W's
they
going
rented
up
by the
towards the
hour.
cities.
I know someone
Right up on the
who
hillside where there's industrial now.
conceived a child at the old fantasy.
Forgive my,
Rooms
my,
with themes.
naiveness.
Zebra
So,
room or the Elvis.
why do we allow motels to be rented for less than 10 hours then? Like if we are regulating time, manner, and place, why not make it a full 24 hours? Maybe I'm very dense here.
It's how prostitution is conducted in general. They would rent for a period of less than 10 hours, and they would have multiple turnovers to the premise that they're renting in a 24-hour period, and that is the whole purpose of capturing those, as I read it.
That makes sense. I'm
Thank
I'm confused why we permit that.
Well, if you have a business traveler that comes into town and checks into the Best Western at 11 o'clock at night and leaves at 7 in the morning, they're there less than 10 hours, and we're not gonna prohibit them from doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they turn the room over in the morning and
Yeah.
rent it again.
Yep.
You may be there 7 hours and it's boom, it's gone again.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to 325.11. There's so transfer of license, a license shall not transfer a license to another licensee, excuse me, nor shall a licensee operate a sexually oriented business under the authority of a license in any place other than their designated location. Sarah was wondering if we need to have another exception, similar to what we did with several other businesses, about what we do in the case of the death of the licensee, where we give them a grace period of X amount of days, or,
That would be logical.
Yeah, it would be. Yep.
Okay.
Can we put that in the general license section? I thought we discussed that at one of our meetings where that was something that would apply to any licenses the city issued, and that we might want to consider that.
I think I sort of recall having that conversation,
Yeah.
but a counterpoint to that was that in some cases, license fees are refundable, at least partially, as required by state
That's
law,
right.
but in other cases, we just keep it.
Right.
So I think we have to do it per the section, but just keep the language the same as what we've done in the past.
Okay.
So, so I think we're in a consensus to add similar language to what we've previously experienced
Consistency, yeah.
around the death of the licensee.
Something
I had a
got
comment
lost in
about
the-
square footage, but I'm not seeing that in here, so.
Yeah, that's right
No, it's
underneath
coming
it.
up.
Yep.
325.12.
I do not see any square footage mentioned in 325.12.
Yeah.
I see the note about it, and I
Right.
had a question about that also, but I'm not finding the
Did we?
content.
Maybe that comment got added to the wrong location.
Yeah, I think, 325.13, regulations pertaining to exhibition of sexually explicit films is where your comment belongs, so if it's like I put it in the wrong spot.
So,
Okay, so just a little further
Which
down.
number
We'll
is
get
it,
there.
Jer?
13.
325.13.
Oh, the next one.
Yeah,
Okay.
the next one.
Yep.
So I was confused on a couple of things. It's oddly specific, but specific, I guess, is fine. Are viewing rooms of 100 square foot allowed? And do they have to have a manager station? And why can't the manager station not exceed 32 square feet?
Have you ever seen these places? I'm,
No?
my understanding is there are some very unsavory types of activities that can happen in private viewing rooms, and that these,
We can guess.
huh?
We can guess.
Yeah,
That might
yeah,
be.
really? And that would be the point of requiring square footage to prevent that.
So I agree with your understanding of that. My question is, why, what I'm reading is, if you have these viewing booths, they can't be bigger than 150 square feet, and then the manager station can't exceed 32 square feet,
They can't be less than 150.
less than 150. You're right, Nancy, I'm sorry. They can't be less than 150 square feet, and then the manager station can't exceed 32 square feet.
10 by 15 room.
But I'm confused why it would be, you can't have a manager station less than, like, maybe I'm very dense, I apologize.
Why
but-
can't it be 100 square feet?
Of a manager station in a
Right,
150
I
square feet
didn't
room.
understand that part either, but somewhere along the line, that must have made sense, but.
No idea.
Unless they're trying to keep the manager area, keeping for manager area duties and nothing else. Since it's a smaller area.
I don't know the history of
reason.
why that was added.
Like a 4 by 8 room.
Yeah,
I think Donna's got a good guess.
Orgies. For lack of being, big. Enough said.
What is that 32 square feet? What is the impact on that, of that? I cannot think of an impact.
Is it correct in assuming the goal of the statute is to restrict the types of activities that can occur in one of these explicit film theaters? And that the space limitations are tied to some basic presumptions about what could occur in private spaces that we do not want to have occurring in our community in these types of spaces.
I think that's correct.
That was tough to figure out how to say.
okay. Well, I won't, I'll leave it for
We're
someone.
unable to discern why the 32 square foot manager station
Is important or,
is
Yeah.
important. That none of us know the history of why that's there.
can we strike that sentence?
Certainly. You
All
can
right.
make it
Yeah, I
20
think-
too.
Could we just say a manager's, I mean, I think that the point is that you have to have a manager station, which I would assume means it has to be manned. I mean, that would seem to make sense, otherwise what's the point?
Well, it has to be included in the diagram already, it says, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't get how a diagram goes, but.
Michael?
Kind of a weird hypothetical, but I know this is actually happening. So there's people who have studios and have OnlyFans and stuff like that. So you'll have multiple computers and they'll all be on there. And that's considered sex work or whatever. Now, say somebody did that in their home, would they need like a license? If I had like 4 different people, or if I had my own like studio or something like that? Like inside the house, would you have to do a license for that? Would it have to be in a certain zone, because that's probably gonna be residential? Or would I have to go into this, zoning area and make the studio for that? I mean, I don't, because
Are you talking about
OnlyFans
a
and all that
business?
stuff is
Oh, it's in your
growing, like exponentially. I mean, it's huge, it's
OnlyFans.
right now. And now there's, I mean,
Don't know.
I don't know what that
So
means.
there's a side comment that what he's talking about is pornographic webcam modeling that happens generally, I guess, in people's homes, although it could happen anywhere, I suppose, in the manager station for all we know. So I think the question is, does any of our city code regulate or have the right to regulate those types of enterprises?
And the answer, Mr. Chair, short version is yes, and hopefully. Coconut Grove, Florida had the issue where the establishment was basically a Big Brother-like dorm with cameras, and then people could, and the argument there is that it's operating a business, a theater, or a studio out of a home, and would not be a qualified home occupation under the Burnsville Code. And that would be the position we would take. It is a business use of a residential home. And it's not listed as an allowed home occupation. Whether that would be sustained, I don't know. It has been, that is what other cities have tried to do in addressing those specific types of situations, and that's what I would surmise we would do as well.
So if I can clarify something, then if it was, say, one person in the privacy of their home, but they are explicitly operating a pay-for-view pornographic website where they model in their home, would you include that in that definition?
Yes, possibly.
Okay, thank you.
It's not an authorized
Not an
use.
authorized home occupation.
Okay.
So that
Just
comes
go
under
leave
the,
that.
That's a whole can of worms.
Yeah, that, I don't think we want to tackle that in city code. I mean, I think there are constitutional protections and other things that we would need to, you know, I
That's
don't
where it
want to
would
fight
go.
that battle.
Yep.
Yep.
Because it goes a full range of, you've got feet,
Figure it out.
you've got hands, you've got the whole body, you've got some this and that, and
Yeah.
the OnlyFans is a whole gamut of range on it. And it can be whatever that somebody likes and it makes money on it. But that's typically what OnlyFans is. It's whatever worked for them to keep it going with the base.
Well, and you don't try to regulate how I work out of my home as a home office working for another employer. Why would the city do that?
Typically,
In most home occupations, it deals with the externalities of the activity, the number of vehicles, trips generated, noise, and those things, and you're correct. If someone is operating a unauthorized home occupation in a very quiet, non-disruptive manner, neighbors don't know, the city doesn't know, and,
I'm just thinking the whole world went work from home a couple of years ago, and we didn't require those people to get licensed. And nor would you presume that that was an unauthorized use of the property, while technically it might be.
Those people probably aren't gonna get, I mean, OnlyFans has had sex trafficking involved with it though too, where people will bring in other people and
Coerced.
and do that, like under a whole house. I mean, there's been, I don't know how easy it is to get around over the 18 thing and all that stuff, but I know there's already been people who have like been raided and stuff for this.
That would be regulated under regular criminal activity, though, I would think. in
Well,
some
I guess I'm
cases.
just saying, I don't know,
Yeah.
there's like
Okay, well, I'll call the question on that line of discussion. I think that we'll just leave it as, the city may decide to pursue it, but I'll leave that to the city, in a court case, I guess.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Jared had another point on a section. What was the section?
Yeah, the previous page, which is 325, 12,
Okay,
section C,
okay.
section C2. This was pointed out by member Nystuen. This is the bottom. Person under 18 years was in a restroom not open to public view or persons of the opposite sex. Member Nystuen just suggested cutting out persons of the opposite sex and just saying in a restroom not open to public view, period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm good
Yep.
with that, that makes sense.
Good one.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I have a general question, maybe this was answered before, but in many of the sections, you say ordinance 588, 101695, something like that. Now, when you enact this, do you still need that ordinance or take all the ordinance out? Are we replacing the ordinance? I didn't check this against the ordinance. What's the intent of that, having it?
Sure, I'll answer that. That refers back to when that regulation was first adopted. So it was adopted in ordinance 588 in 1995 and then put in our city code of ordinances that we have online. So this particular amendment that we're doing here is going to have an ordinance number that will be listed online as well.
So all these ordinance numbers here in the parentheses can be struck out because we don't need it here because it's, at
Yeah.
some point in time, we needed it, but now that you are doing it, we don't need it. Is that
And
correct?
we're kind of ignoring those ordinance references for the purposes of our review. Yeah.
Review, okay. That,
Michelle?
maybe Susan.
And I think you said that it was when it was first adopted, and typically, I believe it's the most recent change to this section, correct?
Sure, well, it depends on what the section is, if you have multiple ordinance
But
references.
our new system now actually tracks every change. So we have a new system for our city code, and it tracks every change, and you can go back and see every change going back from when we started the new system. So we actually have a better system now that keeps track of those numbers much better.
So does that mean that these ordinance numbers will disappear or will still be here
Actually, I think
in the
because
code?
they will still be, it will still be in there as the reference to the, before it was changed, right?
Right, what I'm afraid is that we change something from that ordinance and which takes precedence?
It's whatever is in
So you're
effect
saying
today.
that this ordinance?
The current, the most recent one.
Yeah, right, but since you are putting it here, this ordinance number, does that, this current code plus that ordinance, how does that work?
This draft will replace the existing code.
Right, that's,
I think it's fair to say that the ordinance number will be updated so that there won't be confusion as
Right.
to what the law is.
Yep.
okay, so this ordinance number will be updated with
The new ordinance.
The new ordinance.
new one, but why do you need that, then, the ordinance number?
We'll keep that number for reference.
For reference, okay, sorry about that.
Are there any other comments on sexually oriented businesses? Nancy?
Oh, no, I've moved on to
Okay.
fireworks, but the rest of you haven't.
So 326 fertilizer's been strucken. That takes us to fireworks. I don't actually see any comments. Are there questions on?
I had submitted comments, but.
I had to.
But they were not attended to.
Yeah,
So
they're not
I
in
have
here.
just two small grammatical.
Yeah,
Item.
and that's why I've been referencing your comments, Nancy, throughout.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And I can go through those, or you can go through those right now, and we can.
All right.
take care of it.
327(7)(c). It says all facilities who obtain. It should just say which, since facilities are not a person. And I had a general question about the, it says they have to record this and that and this and that, and including the quantity of fireworks. And I thought, is that when they open the store or what they plan for their inventory? Or I don't know how you have a retail store tell you the quantity of their fireworks. So I didn't know if there was some other way you quantify fireworks?
What exact point, what number?
Well, C, the same, 327(7)(c),
Thank you.
second sentence. The list shall document the name, weight, and quantity of the fireworks to have the permit issued. I did not know what that meant. Quantity that you plan to buy, quantity that,
I think this is my uninformed opinion is that this is related to the material I have on hand because it's listing next to it the material safety data sheet. So
probably from your order sheets that what you ordered is automatically the quantity of so many of
but
this.
would you
so
order
many
it
of
before you
this.
get your permit?
and we have
Fire
Mr.
marshal.
Nelson, the assistant chief.
There he is.
He's the fire.
Hey, how you doing? Yes, that is
Can you crank
correct.
the
The
volume?
reason why that those are on there is so that we know the total quantity on hand.
1 second.
And the way
Doug,
that-
hold on, we can't hear you. We gotta get the volume in the room.
My comments didn't make it in here. I don't know why.
Okay.
I'm
Doug, can you speak now?
You've got them?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so that is correct. The reason for that in in C is so that we know the total quantity on hand if there's a problem inside the store. We would have the MSDS sheets, we would have the shipping papers, and we also use that to verify that they have the right type of fireworks, that they're not selling illegal fireworks, that they are Minnesota specific. And most of the things that you're seeing in there, most of that comes right out of different state requirements and NFPA requirements.
So a store would put all their inventory in and then apply for the permit?
Yeah, typically what happens is they apply for the permit ahead of time, and then the store orders it from fireworks retailers that send it out, and so that the retailers are the ones actually doing the bulk of the paperwork submittal, and so that's some of the stuff that they would send ahead of time, so that we would see that. We normally get that paperwork several months in advance, and then we know what they're getting. We review through it, and then we issue the permit, and we hold it until we actually do the on-site inspection, and then we go through the list that they have, and with our inspection, we take a look to verify that we're seeing what they said they have, and we're also making sure that they have the correct type of fire extinguishers, and if everything looks good, then at that point, we hand them their permit, and they're good to go.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions, comments on fireworks?
I had one that, go ahead. You've got my comment in
Yeah,
front of you,
I mean-
right? Go for it.
Okay. So just for the task force to be aware, because there was a couple comments that weren't in the packet. There was some miscommunication about whether or not we had new comments from the last round. And so
Right.
we missed being able to put them in the packet this time. So Member Ward had a comment on 327.3 permit required, questioning A1, manufacture, store, or sell consumer fireworks, and what store meant. I think Assistant Chief may have addressed that a little bit in his comments, but maybe you could say store for later distribution or sale.
Where else?
Yeah, I think that was my concern was, I could very easily buy, 200 grams or 100 grams of this, that's not a lot of weight. And be having a 4th of July party, but I might buy the fireworks in May, for example, because the sales have started. And technically, the way it's worded, I would be required to obtain a permit to store those. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't inadvertently making it impossible for people to have them for their intended purpose by requiring a permit for your average person who purchases some fireworks for a holiday gathering.
These are not purchase requirements. These are for people that sell.
Right, but that isn't stated
She doesn't want the language to include the consumer,
in the
or
language.
catch the consumer up in the regulation after they purchase the item for their personal use.
So I would like to
For
propose.
future sale.
Yeah, I would like to propose that we accept your modified language in there. That meets what I was looking for.
Store for later distribution or sale.
Could even add with the intent.
We're ready to move on. I got another one from
Please.
Member Ward. 327.4 permit application. I believe this is the third sentence? No, second sentence, which starts with the determination by the fire marshal. Member Ward just pointed it out as a very confusing sentence and has a suggested change, which is prior to processing the application, the fire marshal shall verify that the location where consumer fireworks are stored does not endanger any person or property, and that the persons in charge of the selling or storage of consumer fireworks are competent and trained to handle fireworks.
I just thought it was like an overrun sentence there that made no sense.
I like
Okay,
it.
I like it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Do you guys have that? I'm not seeing that sentence in here, in the paperwork that I'm looking at.
That was the rewritten.
327.4, Doug?
Yep.
second sentence, a determination by the fire marshal.
Yep, that's where I'm looking at that.
Jared, or the.
He doesn't
the
have a
proposal is just
comment.
to reorder the sentence and take
Okay.
the last phrase and move it in front. And then it flows better, it's a better structure.
You won't see it in writing. It's
Yeah, you won't
proposed
see
on
it.
a different piece of paper.
Gotcha, okay.
All right,
I would like to make a motion that we submit that verbiage for him to look at and bring it back next time.
Okay.
And if we feel the need, because I do not want the fire marshal to not see it.
It doesn't make any
Yeah,
substantive change, it's just better sentence structure.
Okay.
yeah, it's just
He has-
grammatical.
The only difficult piece with that is the people selling so if you're thinking about this, we want to be careful with that as well, because you have stores like Walmart and Target and others that are selling it that, they are literally just displays. And so if you have a 16-year-old kid, they don't have any training on fireworks, and most stores aren't going to do that. Where you might see that is if you have the standalone tents, that we only normally have 2 of those a year in town. Those people obviously are trained and competent in the sales of fireworks, but the ones that are handled by Menards employees and Targets and the Walmarts of the world, that would be impossible. That would be an impossible threshold to make sure that all their employees are trained. And so the part of the inspection piece is we make sure that they are we make sure they're in plain view of staff, so that they're not buried in the back of the store where kids can get back there and start lighting them on fire undetected.
I'm gonna do that at Menards this week.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we lost your audio there.
Yep.
No?
He's not muted.
So my question is, does the Walmart and all those people who sell, they have to have a license to do this?
Let's wait until we get Assistant Chief Nelson back.
Yeah, he was talking about the training, but even the license.
Can we wait till we get the chief back?
Yeah, right
Okay.
now,
I know, I said that too.
Here,
Also, it's on his end.
Doug, say something.
you guys hear me?
Oh, there we
Yeah.
go, Pete's back.
Okay. So I didn't hear I could hear most of what you said, but that last gentleman that asked the question, I could not hear that.
Yeah, I'll repeat that. I think it is me who's asked whether the Walmarts and the other stores, do they have to have a license, or do they get licensed to sell this?
Yes, they have to have a permit to sell fireworks.
Okay. But the next question was, your comment to us about training the people who handle that.
Correct. It would be an impossible threshold for Walmart and Target and Menards and some of the other stores that sell them, to possibly get all their potential cashiers trained. These are normally just standalone displays where the consumer goes and picks up the firework, puts it in their cart, brings it up, and then the person rings them out, and out the door they go. It would not be realistic to expect that all the employees are trained in that. Whereas an outside tent sale, where that's all they're doing is selling fireworks, that's a little bit different animal. Those people that sell those, they tend to understand their product very well.
Doug, do we need to make a change? Because the edit that I just read aloud doesn't substantively change that sentence. It just rewords it and makes it more clear. So that second sentence, which starts with a determination, from what I hear you saying, maybe that's too onerous for the Walmarts and the Targets.
It is. Honestly, in my opinion, in my years of doing this, the reality is they're not possibly gonna train all their employees. It's just not possible. And so I don't know that we even include that language.
I would have a strong objection to not having some basic safety training. If you're selling a product, you should have some basic training on that if you are stocking it on shelves or handling it through a checkout process. I mean, even OSHA, I think, requires some workplace safety items, so I don't think that training would be out of line.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying. The reality is, we don't have a way of tracking all the employee training records to find out if they do that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Can we then change it to somehow or other? I'm just thinking loud now here as to there should be enough people in the store who are trained or, something of that sort, that there's some trained supervision in the store.
The
Not
insurance.
necessarily all the specific employees.
So
There's somebody
normal-
knowledgeable and trained.
Normally, when we go out to do these inspections before we issue a permit, we are meeting with the store manager. And so we're having these safety discussions, either myself or my inspectors, of making sure that the proper fire extinguishers are in place. We make sure that the packages that they're selling are not opened, that they're sealed. The one thing you don't want is you don't want to have fuses hanging out where somebody can easily light them. We just talk about, what happens if. And the expectation is that they are passing that information along to their employees at a supervisor's briefing of some sort. But we are not there with a register making sure every employee is on that same page. That ultimately falls to the store to do that.
Sure. I think what I recommend is that we'll work on that sentence, and we'll speak with Doug and try to figure out a kind of a happy medium here, and propose that as part of the final version of this chapter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And am I correct in reading this, that generally speaking, this 327 is all about consumer fireworks as defined, and excludes, if you look at Minnesota statute 624, like 20 through 24, it defines fireworks, so like Roman candles, bottle rockets, those are illegal and you cannot possess them in any amount in the state.
That is correct. That's a misdemeanor to be in possession of those.
Okay. Thanks. There was one comment that we had from a person in the city who said, please make it illegal to shoot off fireworks after 11 p.m. And I would like to comment that they're already violating law because they're certainly shooting off the bigger fireworks, so.
Not necessarily.
Fire, yeah.
Trying to regulate that is not something that's,
I know. It's I
Noise
wish for the same thing, but
Yep.
I understand why we wouldn't put it in.
because I know when I see them above the trees, I'm like, yeah, that's not legal. Or whether you can get them
Sure.
there in time or not.
Well, and even some of the legal ones are loud.
Yep.
And at
legal
this
one-
time, we're regulating more the permitting of the sale of fireworks.
Yes.
And not like,
The usage.
there, this would be like a disturbing the peace kind of
Noise
thing, a
regulation
nuisance.
or something to that effect.
Yep. Comes up at a later title.
Okay. Go ahead.
Great.
That last sentence, public display of fireworks. Now, so
Where
requires
are you
permit.
specifically referencing?
327.9, public display requires a permit. So does that imply that a private display does not? And what is the difference between one and the other?
Yep, that's correct. The public display of fireworks, they can be anything from a theatrical show where it's using fountains and that type of thing, and those are regulated. We don't allow those inside of buildings, up to the fireworks like we have here at the fire muster, that those actually get a different separate permit, and the requirements for that are actually based out of the Minnesota State Fire Code. And so they have very stringent requirements on fallout distances and things like that. So the big display things that we have in town, fire muster, and then the New Year's Eve one at Buck Hill, they submit permits to the fire department. We do the plan review on it, then we issue the permit for those. And then I go out and do the site inspections, the pre-shoot, before they shoot, to make sure that mortars are angled the correct way and that they have the safety things. And those people all have to be licensed by this Minnesota State Fire Marshal's office.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So that's the public display. Now, if I do something in the back, my backyard or front yard, is that a public display or a private display?
It may be illegal.
Right,
probably
it's probably
illegal.
illegal. Because the state statutes regulate that consumer fireworks are the really small things, everything else is fireworks.
Yeah,
And for the
okay.
big stuff, you have to have a license regardless. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that maybe the word public is superfluous there, because it's really the display of fireworks requires a permit, which is in Minnesota
The
statute.
legal display.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fireworks as opposed to consumer.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
consumer fireworks are the small things, and you don't have to have a permit for that, but you can't do it like within 100 feet of a building or the section right above. But those are consumer fireworks. Jared, you had one final amendment?
Yeah, in the section right above, 327.8F, and I can't remember if this was Member Ward or Nystuen, the end of that sentence, juveniles may not possess consumer fireworks unless under the direct supervision of an adult as opposed to a responsible adult.
Okay.
Yeah, prove I'm responsible.
Yeah. Prove I'm not.
I don't know whose it was, if it was yours or mine, but.
Okay.
Good luck defining that.
All right, well, I think that's it on fireworks. Anything else? All right,
Thanks, Doug.
so, let's see, we reviewed that. That takes us to miscellaneous items. The next code review task force meeting will be September 28th, 2022, at 5:30 PM here in the council chambers. Meetings will typically be held on the last Wednesday night of each month in 2022. Our homework is to review Title III, Chapter 29, Tree Contractors, which is provided in your packet. Comments are needed by August 14th. Title III, Chapter 28, rental licensing was not ready for review, but can be sent out soon, depending on status. Michelle?
I'll just add a little note to that. As we were working through this, we realized we needed more time for rental licensing, working with the fire chief to make some of the updates that he thought really needed to be added. And so we may substitute rental licensing for a different chapter instead, so that we will have, so we will not be too short on the time for the next one. So I'll go through the chapters, I'll talk with the fire chief and everything and make sure that we get, know the right timeline and be sending out probably an additional chapter or two, depending on the size, for the next meeting to review.
So will you be able to get that to us in the next week?
Yes, that was the, I would anticipate that we would try to get something done by early next week.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Did you say?
There are no,
I thought you said they were due 8/14, you meant 9/14, I assume?
yeah, 9/14.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
they're due, they were due this couple weeks ago, guys, so.
Let's get on
Great
it.
correction. Due September 14th.
I didn't catch that.
All right, there are no additional items, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for being with us.